Hello, and welcome to this episode of our Accelerated ID series. My name is Shantae Spildegger, and I am the Chief Trainologist and founder of the Instructional Design Company. Today, we're going to be talking to you about teacher skills that cross over into instructional design. And joining me for this conversation today is Katie Short, our Director of Learning Solutions at the Instructional Design Company. So again, today we're going to be talking about your teacher skills that cross over into instructional design. So if you are a teacher, you are in the right place. We're going to be talking about how your skills immediately apply to some of the skills that are required for instructional design. So let me go ahead and welcome Katie into our group. Hey, Katie, how are you
Hi,
doing?
how are you? I'm great.
Good, good. Well, before we kick this off, Katie, I would love it if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about your instructional design journey. Where did you start out?
Absolutely. So I am an old middle school and high school former middle school and high school teacher. So I used to teach social studies, American history, government. I taught computers for a while, but I was a teacher for about 10 years. That was my first profession out of college. And I decided to kind of go back to school and think about just some other career choices that I could make where I could make a little bit more money and have some more flexibility. And I had never heard of instructional design before. And it sounded like, yes, this is checks all the boxes for me in terms of what it could provide, all the different freedoms that maybe I could see with it. And I just couldn't pass it up. And so that's really kind of where I am now, where I've landed, and I can't be happier.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'm really excited about this episode that you're going to be leading for us. So I'm going to take myself out of the way, hand over the controls to you, and sit back and learn from you.
This has been part of my experience and part of Shantae's experience as we have made this transition into instructional design. And like I said before, I was a teacher for a long time, and I really thought that was the only thing that I could do. And it was really the only possibilities for me. And if I had gone into another profession, or if I wanted to do something else, especially make a little more money in a different position, I would have had to go back to school and lose a lot of the skill set that maybe I had before. And the thing is that instructional design really is a great transition, and it's a great career choice to be able to move towards and use a lot of those teacher skills very, very quickly. And I had a lot of light bulb moments in my learning experience to be like, oh man, all these things are so close to teaching. And there's such a great jump into and a great foundation from teaching to build on if you wanted to do something else. And this has been part of that experience. So, and just moving forward there, just a reminder that this is part of our Accelerator ID series. Please continue to jump in there. But just a little quote here that teachers have three loves: love of learning, love of learners, and the love of bringing the first two loves together. And that really kind of transcends even from teaching, and it kind of goes into instructional design. I'm still, and Shantae and I are still big lovers of learning, and we love to continue that process. Even if we aren't necessarily in the classroom, we are in this capacity in the same kind of way. We still do a lot of those same loves. And that really comes from this basis of a lot of these skills that we're going to talk through today. So for instructional designers and for us at the Instructional Design Company, we really look at and look to a process called the Addi Model. And this is a very traditional process from instructional design. And we're going to use this today as a basis to see a lot of the same skills that teachers use to be able to use in potentially in a career in instructional design. So I'll kind of make some parallels, and I'll kind of show and talk through some things that maybe you do in your teaching world that we also do in instructional design. We just maybe call it something else, or we maybe call a different formal process around it in a different way. So this Addi model follows different phases, and the first one being an analyze phase, a design phase, a develop phase, implement phase, and then an evaluate phase. And we actually do this in many, many different sectors of the world or different professions, but teaching especially. We see a lot of this in what we do as teachers or what you do as a teacher. So if we want to jump into that analyze phase, a big portion of what we do as a teacher is that we lesson plan. We think about our curriculum, we think about specific types of lessons, and we plan them. We build them in a way that is important and in a way for us to think about our learners, and we think about what our students and what they would maybe want to know. In instructional design, we call this a needs analysis or even maybe a training needs analysis. So we're thinking about in this phase all the different parts that may be important to what we are trying to create and the learners that maybe we are thinking about in that process. So we're going to gather a lot of information. We're going to think about different steps in the process that maybe you do very quickly as a teacher in kind of in your process, but we're going to call it out as a formal step in this analyze process. So the next part that we would maybe do, and as a teacher, if you are starting your lesson planning, you're going to be thinking about your students. You're going to be thinking about who they are, what they struggle with, what would be most appropriate for them if you're thinking about creating a lesson or an activity or a part of a unit as you're working through and presenting that. And then as an instructional designer, we're doing the same thing. We're calling that defining our learner persona. We might give that persona something to do, something to see. We want to think about our pain points. We want to think about kind of what our learners, whoever they are, what are they struggling with? And what does our product, what does our development that we're working to create, what's that going to solve for them? And what's hopefully it's going to help them to be able to do as a result of that. The next part would be maybe as a teacher is you would think about your learning objectives. So if you think about your students, you think about who you're trying to serve. Instructional designers, we would think about this learner persona that we might maybe create. As a teacher, you would start thinking about your objectives. This might be something that you are given. You might examine learning objectives that are passed down or given in your instructional materials, your textbooks, that lesson inside of a unit. You would just maybe kind of look and see what those objectives are and maybe where they fall for the lesson that you're trying to create. As an instructional designer, we're going to create those. We're going to write those learning objectives. We're going to think about how they might apply to the product or the end result. And we're still in this analyze phase. We're still in this gathering and analysis of all the things that we might need to be able to then start building in another phase. And then as a teacher, you might also, as you examine those learning objectives, map them to your grade level curriculum. You might map them to a state test or another type of benchmark that you would be able to look and see, this is exactly where I need to look towards, or this is the overall curriculum that I'm trying to connect to be able to make sure that lesson is appropriate and falls in the same line as everything else. We do also do this in instructional design. We might align that objective to a larger goal within the organization. So for example, we might, if there's a goal within the organization to reduce costs in certain ways, a training might be able to help an employee to reduce those costs in some way. So we would want to create something that's going to really connect to a goal or connect to something within an organization, within an institution that wants to reach that goal, and a training might be able to help that, or some type of learning outcome or course to be able to do that. And we do that as teachers as well. And then we're out of the analyze phase and we're kind of into the designing and developing. So as a teacher, as you've thought about all the things that need to go into that lesson and you've planned, and in that planning process, you're now going to start creating those things. So you're going to create slides. Maybe if you're giving a lecture, you're going to find videos. You're going to think about all the things within that lesson that your students would need to do. So then you're going to create those materials. So worksheets, activities, cutting out things that they would need at certain points of that lesson, you're going to go create all of that stuff. And that's what we do in the design and development stage in instructional design as well. We design the instructional materials. This might include an outline of the course. And then the next step is maybe storyboarding, or maybe it is writing a script for a video that we want to create, creating that video, editing that video, putting those lessons together into modules to maybe have a course at the end. So we're doing all the same steps, but we're calling them out as a part of that formal design process and also the development process. So all those things that maybe a teacher would just quickly be able to do, we're doing the same thing in instructional design, just might have a different timeline depending on what we're creating. We're still taking the same steps to be able to do that. And then we're in the implement phase. And as in this phase, as a teacher, you would be implementing the lesson. You would be carrying it out, delivering. This is the sweet spot for a teacher because you are making the complicated, maybe big concept, you're delivering it to students. You're explaining it in the way that they need to. You're facilitating the activities that go along with that. Or you're maybe writing something for someone else to do, like a substitute plan. That's a big part of an implementation plan because you're planning it for someone else to be able to deliver or do. We do the same thing in instructional design. A true instructional designer might not also be the facilitator. That's a kind of a difference that we might see in terms of a teacher. As a teacher, you're going to create the lesson, plan it, analyze, design, develop, do all the things. And then you're going to be the person that's going to deliver that lesson and be able to carry out those activities. That may or may not be part of the job as an instructional designer. And that might be a big difference. Sometimes you're also the facilitator, which means that you get to kind of teach as well. But the implementation plan is that you would schedule out, you would plan everything that a lesson or a course or a training would involve. And you would plan everything in every piece, the schedule of things, what needs to happen at one certain point. You would kind of create that plan, and it may be handing it over to somebody else to be able to do from there. And then the last portion, which is evaluate. So in teaching, we would evaluate our students in a lot of ways. We would create tests, we would create quizzes, we might administer some sort of state testing or benchmark, but we would sit back and say, man, that lesson went really well, or it didn't go well. Maybe they're struggling with that portion. That's still evaluation. We're still evaluating that lesson and whether or not it really kind of hit our objectives or our goals, or that our students were very successful in being able to move forward when it came to that lesson. Instructional design, we do the same thing. This might come across as a course survey. This might come across as a course evaluation. This might look as something we look back on a training or course and say, hey, this had an impact in our organization in some way when it came to performance, when it came to some sort of metric that we wanted to measure during that process or instituting that training or course. So that might be a bigger step or a bigger version of evaluation, but you evaluate as a teacher all the time. You're evaluating whether the students understand, whether they got it, whether you need to maybe explain it in a different way in order for them to also have success. And we do the same thing in instructional design. I also want to point out some other notable skills that I don't want you to overlook as a teacher. And I know that I struggled with this in thinking my skills are on like a small end and a small scale, and they're not. You have these amazing skills as a teacher that you can also translate that's not just in that Addi process that maybe you see in instructional design or see in other parts of this profession. You manage an LMS as a teacher, especially after COVID, and a lot of teachers were putting their lessons onto some sort of platform like Google Classroom or Canvas. You're managing an LMS. Instructional designers do that as well. They manage an LMS sometimes, or they might keep track of trainings or courses as they exist for an organization or where they are existing in that organization to be able to organize them. You're also a fantastic communicator. You have tough conversations all the time. You talk to parents, you talk to your leadership, you talk to students, you get on their level, you understand what they need. That is a huge important part of instructional design. And it's something that we have to have. We need it in order to be successful. And a lot of people are really struggling with this, maybe in the field. And that is like your superpower that you can bring to the table as a teacher. And also, you're really good at what most teachers I know are really good at being super creative. We are really good at presenting things and presenting information in a way using pennies to be able to have this great lesson and make things look great and it come across that way. That is creativity. And don't overlook these other skills that make you stand out in terms of your skill set and also in terms of everyone else in the field. So I am, and I know that Shantae is a huge proponent of these things, and that teachers have these superpowers that sometimes are told that, like, oh, you're just a teacher. Not true. These things are in these other skills, especially in the Addi process. We see them all the time in instructional design, and also these other skills that make you so much more important in this field of instructional design as someone that already has all this stuff that they can really call upon and use in this new place, in this new, maybe this new field that you're in. So those are a lot of the things, and there's a ton of other stuff that maybe you can use in crossing over your teacher skills. But if you are on the fence, if you're thinking, man, I can kind of do some of this stuff, but not all, I promise you that you can. There's all these things that you can bring in from your profession, and you are still a lover of learners and a lover of learning, and you can bring all of that to this new field and have it as this firm foundation that you can build on from there. So I want to encourage you, and I want to tell you that this is possible, and all these things are really important as we think about, and if you are even curious about moving into instructional design, it's all there for you. I promise. I swear. I did it and Shantae did it. And there's all these other teachers that can build on this experience that they've had if you want to make this move into instructional design. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for having me. And I will absolutely be happy to do this again.
Thank you so much for presenting on this very important topic. You know, there are so many teachers out there, you, me, other teachers who have that mentality of like, what else can I do? I'm just a teacher. But teachers, like you said, they have superpowers. And in my mind, teachers are superheroes.
Yep.
With all of the things that they have to balance, right? They're taking care of the children in their classroom. They're preparing lesson plans. They're project managing. Mm-hmm. They're having to have exceptional communication skills to work with parents who are upset. So you bring just a really deep wealth of information and knowledge and skills into instructional design. And I often say that some of my very best hires, Katie, they were teachers first, right? Mm-hmm. Because you get immersed in so much in a teacher environment that you have a lot of capacity for a lot of different things. You can work in an LMS, you can present, you can create lesson plans, you can do curriculum mapping, you can have tough conversations and do that with compassion. You're creative. You're used to not having a budget, so you're used to just creating stuff on your own. So there are just so many wonderful skills that you have that immediately apply to instructional design today.
Yep.
And Katie, thank you so much for sharing all of this really amazing information. So I hope this is helpful to everyone. If you haven't yet downloaded the resume guide, be sure to do that, because there are charts in there that show the difference between a teacher skill and an instructional design skill, and then even some tips on how you can pull those skills into your resume and make them speak more to an instructional design job. So be sure to do that. And hey, we'll see you in the group. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in. And Katie, again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.